Hi everyone, Cam here from Yes Auto, and today I'm going to be driving this thing, the Audi RS e-tron GT. Bit of a mouthful. Now we've been waiting a long time for this car because it was first shown in concept form about 3 years ago and it's now finally here. So what is it? Well, it's not only Audi's answer to the Porsche Taycan, it's actually built on the same platform as the Taycan and if you squint a little bit, looks very similar. So today we're going to find out whether you should go for one of these over the Porsche, what are the differences, and also what's the difference between the RS version and the standard car because they look very similar. All that and a full review coming up in just a moment. But before I get into the video, remember to hit the like button and subscribe because we've got plenty more awesome videos just like this one. Now most RS models come with a wider body kit to make the car look more muscly and angrier. However, the RS e-tron is exactly the same as the standard e-tron, so it's actually a little bit difficult to tell them apart. However, we've got a few little things to help you distinguish the different GTs, and it starts off here at the grille. On the standard car, that is in gloss grey. On here, it's gloss black, although if you want to option it as the same colour as the body, you can do. Costs around about £300. Rest of the front end though, exactly the same as the standard e-tron GT. Moving further back, the base car has 20-inch wheels. We've got 21s as standard on the RS model, and the rest of the design back here is exactly the same as the base e-tron GT. However, the version we have here is the carbon black Vorsprung edition. That's the range topper. And with that, we have a bit of carbon fibre around here. Now, this is a little vent that channels air through the wheel well to improve aerodynamics. We've also got carbon up here as well. And this is a little bit different to the base RS. The standard RS has a panoramic roof, whereas on the carbon edition and also the Vorsprung, it is a carbon roof. Also got a bit of carbon down here along the skirts. And it's the same story at the back of the car. Yes, we have a diffuser at the back here, but you get exactly the same one on the standard e-tron GT. Although ours is a little bit different because it's got the carbon fibre finish, which you get on the Vorsprung and also the mid-range carbon edition. Of course, we've got the RS logo back here as well. You don't get that on the standard car. And we've also got a movable rear wing. That does come on the regular e-tron GT. But I think while we're back here, you can kind of see the lineage with the Taycan, particularly this rear 3/4 looks a lot like the electric Porsche. The front end, though, is a bit more different. The Porsche looks smaller and more like an electric sports car, whereas the Audi looks, well, like a GT. The RS e-tron GT has the quietest electric tailgate I've ever come across. And it opens up a decent boot space of 366 litres on the RS, which is the same as what you get on the Porsche Taycan. If you go for the standard model, you get a little bit more at 405 litres. It's not the biggest boot out there, but it's quite deep. So if you want to get some big suitcases in there, you can do, you just have to push them really quite far back. We've also got a little storage net here, and there's also a bigger one to keep things in place, along with two little storage compartments either side of the boot. And if that's not enough, you've also got just over 80 litres at the front of the car as well. That's right, the e-tron GT has a frunk. Now on the Taycan, you've got a little touch panel here that you just swipe your hand and the charging port opens up automatically. But on the RS e-tron GT in the standard car, you've got to do it manually. So you've got a fast charger on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, like the Porsche, you've got a home charger as well. But unlike the Porsche, you actually have one battery option to choose from instead of two, and it's the larger version that you get on the Taycan at 84 usable kilowatt hours. Now here it comes in at 283 miles of official range, so in the real world you're probably looking at more like 240, or in Scotland, of where it's extremely cold, closer to the 200 mark. Now if you go for the regular e-tron GT, that comes in more at 300 because we've not got as much power. More on that in a little bit. So that positions the RS e-tron GT somewhere in between the Taycan 4S and the Taycan Turbo, but it's still not quite there in terms of the Tesla Model S, which has a range of up to 412 miles. The good news is like the Taycan, this is built on a 100-volt architecture, which means it can charge really quickly. So actually, the maximum speed is 270 kilowatts. So if you can find a suitable charger, you can go from 10 to 80% charge in around about 30 minutes, which is very quick indeed. And speaking of performance, the RS e-tron GT is freaking fast. So both cars get a dual motor setup for all-wheel drive. In the RS e-tron GT, as standard, it's producing 590 brake horsepower, but there's an overboost mode when you floor the accelerator or use launch control, which lasts for about 2.5 seconds, and it gives you 636 brake horsepower. Now, on the standard car, that dips a little bit. You're looking at standard output of 469 brake horsepower, which goes up to 523 in overboost. Now the RS goes from 0 to 62 in 3.3 seconds. The standard car is 4.1, which is very, very fast indeed. So that, again, a bit like with the battery options, the RS e-tron GT really does sit in that middle ground between a Taycan 4S and the Taycan Turbo. But those aren't the only performance upgrades. On the RS, we get carbon discs as standard, as well as sports dampers. And on both models, if you want to option it, you can also get rear wheel steering, which when you're turning around tight corners, the rear wheels will steer in an opposite direction to the front to give you a slightly tighter turning circle. And if you're going along a motorway, they'll steer in the same direction as the front wheels to give the car more stability. We've also got lots of differences on the inside as well of the RS e-tron GT over the standard car, and they include these lovely sports seats that feel a lot like buckets, but they hug you nicely and will feel really great on long journeys. And in R1 they're also perforated as well and adorned with the RS badge, so you know that you're in an RS. We've also got different headlining, which is Alcantara. And speaking of Alcantara, you'll get an RS steering wheel with an Alcantara wrap. But in our car, we've got perforated leather. And that's because this is an early test car. If you go and buy an RS e-tron GT in the showroom today, it'll come with Alcantara. We also have RS badges on the door sills, and you also get some RS graphics as well on the infotainment system. And that leads me on to pricing, because our car is slightly different to the base RS e-tron GT. Now, prices start at £110,200, which is £31,000 more than the base e-tron GT. Then above that, you've got the Carbon Black Edition, which is just over £120,000. And then this car, the Vorsprung, which is a little bit over £130,000. And that adds things like this wonderful carbon fibre dashboard. Now, as you may have noticed, that £110,000 starting price is very close to a Porsche Taycan Turbo. But it's worth bearing in mind that you get a slightly better equipped car as standard with the RS e-tron GT than you do on the Porsche. So if you do a like for like, the Porsche will actually work out a little bit more expensive. And as you'll find out a bit later, they are actually very different cars. And the same can be said for the rest of the interior, because I was expecting this to be basically a rebadged Porsche Taycan, and it really isn't. So let's kick things off with the infotainment screen, which is your typical Audi system. It's ultra crisp, very responsive, And the important thing is it's really easy to use on the go, which can't be said for a lot of VAG products. Well, maybe the Porsche comes pretty damn close, but it is a great infotainment system. And if you don't like it for whatever reason, you can just hook up Apple CarPlay if you want. We also have Audi's fantastic MMI virtual cockpit. Now, it's kind of very similar to what you get on every other Audi, although the graphics are a little bit different, A, to reflect that this is an RS version, and also to show you that it's an electric car. So we can see that we can see how much power we're using, how much battery we've got left, but also how much we're regenerating when using the brake regen features. It's also customizable as well, so if you wanted to see the full map on the screen, you can do. It looks fantastic, and while the layout is very similar to every other Audi, the actual screen quality is a little bit different, and it looks superb. Now that leads me on to the center console, which has physical buttons. I can't believe a car in 2021 has physical buttons, but we have it in the RS e-tron GT. We've got full buttons for the climate controls, which is a big win. And we also have some physical buttons down here for the hazards as well as the drive select. And if I were to go through that, we have efficiency, if you're wanting to eke out a bit more battery. We've got comfort, dynamic, which is the sportiest setting, and we've also got individual, so you can set the car up in the way that you want. And as we also have air suspension in this one, you can actually adjust the ride height if you want to. So if you're getting somewhere that's a little bit rocky, you can jack the ride height up, and if you want to slam it, you can do so as well. Things become a lot more Porsche Taycan in the back of the RS e-tron GT. Now, I'm just under 6 foot and I've got the driving seat in my position. And that means I've got plenty of legroom, but headroom is a little bit tight. I fit in here absolutely fine, but if you were 6 foot and over, it's going to get really tight. In fact, one of my colleagues here has been in the back. He's over 6 foot and it's just too narrow for him. So if you're tall, you're going to have to slouch a little bit. We have got a middle seat, but really you're going to only want to use it in moments of desperation because it's tiny. In fact, the buckle is actually kind of in the middle of the seat, which is a bit bizarre. We've got 2 USB-C ports at the bottom here. And this center console is quite different to the Taycan. So the Taycan, you can actually option a touchscreen climate control system. On here, though, we've got good old-fashioned vents, as well as some buttons. So we've got buttons for the heated seats, which come with the Vorsprung edition, and we've also got a couple of buttons to increase or decrease the temperature. I'm in the Scottish Highlands inside an electric sports Grand Tourer. Now, this is the kind of place I would want to bring a manual 400 brake horsepower sports car. But I'm in something that is really the polar opposite of that. And is it just as fun to drive? So I'm going to start things off with the car in dynamic. What does this feel like as a performance car, and can I enjoy these gorgeous roads? And the answer is absolutely. This is a joyous car to drive in the Scottish Highlands, but it's different to a Porsche Taycan. What you'll notice first of all is the difference in the steering. It's just a little bit lighter and more Audi-like. And if you've not driven an Audi, that means that it just feels very, very sharp and responsive, but there's not a lot of weight to it. It's very light and a little bit on the vague side. The Porsche, meanwhile, is a bit more weighty, and it's designed to make you feel as though you're in a sports car. What we have in the Audi, though, is a little bit more relaxed, a bit more suited to laid-back driving. And the same can be said for the suspension. In no way does it feel wallowy or make the car feel heavy, but it just has a more relaxed feeling to it. It doesn't feel as razor sharp and pointy as a Porsche Taycan. But that's by no means a bad thing, and that's what I've come to really realise when driving this e-tron GT, particularly this RS version, is that it feels different to a Taycan. I was really expecting it to feel like just a rebodied Porsche. But this does feel distinctly Audi, distinctly more relaxing. It is, though, when you want to get a move on, extremely fast, and that's not even with launch control. You just have this effortless performance all of the time. It's such a ridiculously fast car. In fact, I kind of feel like it's the perfect amount of power. I could probably still manage with the less powerful e-tron GT absolutely fine. But the way it delivers its power means that, at least on these open roads in northern Scotland, can really let the car rip. I was going to say sing, but I don't think electric cars do sing. This RS e-tron GT actually has a sound generator, which makes it sound a little bit more menacing, a little bit deeper. Driving through town, I've got it in comfort mode, and this I think is where it starts to feel really different compared to the Porsche Taycan. We're absorbing bumps just a little bit better than the Porsche, and it's also quieter. We don't currently have the electric sound generator going on in the background, so it really is a very smooth and quiet experience. Just what you'd want from a GT. But now we're coming to the other end of the town, and I'm going to put it back into dynamic and floor it. Whoa! Yes, this is very, very fast. Let's talk about the range. 283 miles official. We set off this morning with around 240 miles in the tank, but it is a very cold day and I've got 115 miles left, and I've not covered 120 odd miles today. I've probably covered 60 to 70. There are, however, 2 gears, and that's quite unusual because in an electric car most only have 1. Now, in most driving modes you'll be in 2nd gear even when you're pulling away from a standstill. First is only used when you're in dynamic and you're doing launches to give you that really snappy acceleration. It's the same system that you get on the Porsche Taycan. I also like the optional rear wheel steering that we've got in this car because it really shrinks the car's wheelbase and makes it feel a lot more nimble. So if you're having to do a quick turn in the road, it doesn't feel like you're moving about a big saloon car. It feels a lot smaller than it actually is. So what do I like about the e-tron GT? I like that it feels like a different car to the Taycan. It feels like a GT rather than a proper performance model, although it is still incredibly quick. What I don't like, the steering, but to be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Audi steering systems in the first place. I prefer the feel of something like a Porsche Taycan. So if you like Audis, you'll like the steering in here. And it's also positioned very closely to the Porsche as well. It is better equipped than the Porsche, but I think a lot of people will be tempted to go for the Porsche instead. Either the 4S and go for the additional battery, or go for the turbo. You do get a slightly better equipped car with the RS e-tron GT, and it is a distinctly different car as well. If you want an electric sports car, you go for a Porsche Taycan. If you want a GT, a Grand Tourer, a cruiser, go for the RS e-tron GT. And you won't be disappointed, although you might have a harder time choosing between the e-tron GT and the RS e-tron GT. Not sure which one I'd go for. RS.